I thought as we enter mid-season, I'd give you an overview of the material that we're presenting in the HPDE 1 and 2 classrooms so that you know what's being taught and when it's being taught in them. I want to thank all the people that have contributed to the material in the show. I've gathered things from Steve Hook and from Ryan and from Fulton and from the Arizona group. I actually sat in on one of their training classes and lifted some things from them. So it's been a collaborative effort gathering this information so that I could put it together. One of the things that we're doing different this year is before an event, we actually have a mailing that goes out specific to the HPD1 and HPD2 drivers, just to give them a little bit more information about the event and things that they need to do so that it reduces the stress on them that very first day. So typically 4 or 5 days before an event, they'll receive an email. It starts with just a basic introduction about the session and where we're going to be going and which tracks we'll be at. We encourage them to do a little bit of homework as well, so we give them the rule sheet and the flag sheets so that they can learn about those before they come. We also encourage them to do a little bit of on-track instruction, so we give them links, in this case, to the Auto Club instruction sheet that Colin did, and then we give them references to some printed material as well so that they can become familiar with the track and the basic line before they come to the event. And then we also encourage them to do pre-tech inspection with their mechanics. So we provide them with the forms so that they can get that done before they come to the track. And then we review the schedule with them so that they're prompt that very first day for the driver meeting and then for our individual breakout sessions. Then depending upon the track, we'll also provide them with a little facilities map to show them where they enter the track, where they park, where tech spec and that kind of thing is. So we really want to make that first hurdle, that first day form easy, so we provide a lot of this information up front. And I think that's helped on that first morning of each event. At that point, after the initial driver meeting in the cafeteria has been excused and drivers report to the HPD 1 and 2 classroom, we've customized the slideshow a little bit depending upon what track we're at, but the general format is the same. We've also developed the curriculum in a chronological way as well, so that each session, while they may cover the same thing like elements of a turn, they get progressively more advanced as we get into further sessions of the day. The very first session of the day starts out with a little bit of administrative paperwork. I have them sign the registration logs. I talk about the importance of the NASA passports and hand those out. And then the first engagement with the student is really to talk about, a survey of the drivers, who's been there one time or 3 or 4 times, who's at the first track event. And then we talk about the cars that they're driving, who's driving something under 140 horse and who's over, who's over 500 horse. We have those as well. And we talk about the challenges of HPD 1 and 2 and mixing that smorgasbord of driver and car combinations. And I want them to know that, unlike some of the more advanced groups where either the drivers are all better or the cars are all exactly the same, it's really a challenge that we have, but if we work together, we can make it work, flawlessly. I also want to point out to them that while they're, accustomed to driving their cars on the streets, once they enter the track, they've really entered an extreme sport. And I want them to know that, if they were taking scuba diving lessons or, aerobatic flying lessons or parachute lessons, that day, they would really be focusing because it's something that's foreign to them. But in the case of our racing, they're accustomed to being in their cars, and so they have a complacency. And so I really want to dispel that and let them know what they're going to be doing is extreme. And to do that, I show them 3 different videos. One is a crash of a car on a warm-up lap. Tires must have been cold, and they spin out into the interior wall and take 2 or 3 cars with them. The other one is a hot pit wreck, where cars are just parked along an active racing surface, and a car comes off the track and just creams one of the parked cars. And then the final one, Run Off and Roll, is video from Turn 8 and Turn 9 at Willow Springs, where a driver overcorrected, went across the road, and went into the infield and rolled and destroyed his car. So we show those things so that even in those HPDE environments, things can happen. Then gauging upon the response of the classroom, I can also show them a tragic situation that happened out of Chuckwalla with two young women drivers, and tell the story about what happened there. I don't always show that. It kind of depends upon the reactions to the group. So I reinforce that that what we're doing is an extreme sport, but that we're going to do, at NASA, we're going to do our part of being safe. And I highlight that we have real tech inspections, we have classroom instructions, and we have rules that are enforced, and you have instructors in the cars, and we have tiered approval and promotion levels, and we have trained corner workers, and we have race directors always watching the track, and we have paramedics, and we have fire extraction crews, and also highlight the fact that we're carrying medical coverage for them as well in case something happens. So I really reinforce that we're going to do our part of being safe, but there's also their part of being safe. They have to be personally responsible for their vehicle and for their own personal safety. And to do that, we go through this list of rules, the list that they had seen in the pre-event mailing. But we talk about the driver, the car, and then under driver, obviously no alcohol. But we expand upon that, and I talk about that they need to be good physical condition, that if they've got heat exhaustion by the end of the day, or if they're tired from driving from Arizona from the night before, we need to consider their ability to react to situations. And then we go through all the other rules that are associated either with the driver or the car. We talk about on-track safety as well as safety in the paddock. So these are all items that we pulled out of other material and just cover basic safety elements. So we've talked about what NASA does to be safe. We talk about the individual person, what they need to do to be safe. But I also really reinforce the need for the team to be safe. And I try to build up the fact that HPD 1 and 2, we're a team and we've got to work together. We do our best to enforce the team part of being safe, which is largely just passing. I lifted a video off the internet about passing and passing rules, and that's good to show, gives them some visualization of it. Fact that they have to know the zones, and we'll look at each individual track layout and define those at that point. And then talk about the responsibility of the slower car or the faster car. Our instruction to them is that the slower car, the point by is an invitation to pass. It's recommended that you give it, but it's not required. But once you do, you stay on your own line, you breathe your throttle so that the faster car can get by. We talk about that the faster car doesn't have to accept the invitation to pass. If they're uncomfortable with the zone or they would rather just follow that car, they don't have to accept the invitation. And every session, every event, we always have issues about where the brake zone is and when do they have to back out. But ultimately, it's the faster car that has the responsibility to execute the safe pass. At this point, and this is a change this year, we talk about that first session in the driver instruction, again, checking their mental and physical capabilities, things that may have happened to their car or the track. In this first session, we tell them where to grid, they'll need their wristbands, and what time they should be at the track. At this point, and this is different this year, I released the HPD2 drivers. So they've had the basic safety orientation, and they're released now to go out and to work on their cars or watch the other track. So once the HPD2 drivers are left, I'll have just the 1 drivers. And so we talk about communication. How are we going to put 40 or 50 cars on the track with a dozen corner workers and race control and have no way to communicate between the cars? So we discuss the flags at this point, and I tell them it's not much different than smoke signals. It's just a visual way for everyone to communicate. And we'll go through each one of the flags and discuss what the command is, what we need to do, and iterations of them. And so they're familiar with the basic flags by this point. One thing we're going to be doing in the next couple of events is actually videotaping driving on the track with the flag workers waving different flags. I think it's important that they know that they have to actively look for that flag. It's not so apparent that they're just going to catch it in their peripheral vision, that they have to specifically look out. And so we're going to shoot a video in the next couple of events to highlight that. And we then go into the basic elements of a turn. We talk about the difference between taking a turn on the road and staying in your lane versus a race turn, and why the radius of a turn is important. We then go through the 4 basic elements of a turn, the braking, the turn in, the apex, and the track out. And for each one of those have 4 or 5 kind of backstory items to talk about. But this is where they get their first exposures to the elements of a turn. This is the mantra that we go through as we describe those turns, you know, the braking, be slow going in, brake in a straight line, all those type of things. And this slide we've repeated 3 or 4 times in the presentation, so it's a mantra that hopefully they will start to be able to do themselves when they're out on the track. One of the key focuses we talk about too is where you look. It's so much different than driving on the road where we're just looking at the car, you know, one car length ahead of us, how much different it is on the track. Always keeping your eyes up, looking beyond your next element of the turn, and knowing that where you look is where you're going to go. So we spend quite a bit of time on their eyes and where they look. Ultimately, somebody's going to go off track, so we talk about that. We talk about a little off track. What does that mean? And that's typically either 2 off or 4 off as you track out, that you've gone too wide and you've tracked out, you know, but at least you're going relatively parallel to the race surface. And so I have a video of what a typical, you know, little off looks like. I'll go through the instructions of what to do there. You know, don't overcorrect, go straight, and then report to black flag. Then we talk about what happens if you go a lot off track, and the video we show here is me going off turn 9 at Willow Springs and going very, very deep off. So a little self-deprecation there always adds levity to it, but we talk about that and the correction and what you need to do in case you really go off track a long ways. At this point, that's the end of the first session. I've released HPDE 1 people, and they have their wristbands, and I've also been trying to be on grid for that very first session as well, just to encourage them and get them excited, and so we get them released to their first event. After that first event is over, all the HPD 1 and 2 drivers return to the classroom. And our very first thing that we do is a kind of an incident report. We talk about the grid. Did you find your instructor? Were you on time? You know, did you have your pass cards? You know, did the grid work well? Then we talk about teamwork. You know, did we give point buys? Did people lift throttles? You know, was there any aggression on the track? And we talk about that. And then I give them the opportunity to self-report. Anybody want to confess things that they did on the track that weren't right? And in the event that they don't have anything, then we go through the incident report that race control gives us and talk about each individual situation, what had happened, what caused it, how could you do it differently next time. We also start to build then upon the material we covered in the first class, talking about in the case of emergency, what do you do if a car spins in front of you versus if you've had an accident or you're stopped on the track. And we go through those basic safety features. I think it's also important this year to give the drivers a clear path of what they need to do to be promoted. So I've outlined what it takes to go from HPD 1 to HPD 2, and then I worked with John. I asked him, you know, what do you want to see when you get an HPD 3 driver come up, and so he gave me a list of the things that he wants as well. So I start to communicate that, you know, this is the promotion path and this is what you need to do to get to the next levels. At that point, I released the HPD 2 drivers. Again, encourage them to be aware of their physical conditions and their mental conditions, their cars, how things may have changed on the track with race groups going out and things being different. I also encourage them, if they think they're a faster car, to show up to the grid early and grid up front. One thing we've had some discussion about is I had a slide in here, and it still is, it hasn't been edited yet, about letting the instructors drive your cars. I mean, that's a good thing, I think, for them to do, but we want that to be at the discretion, obviously, of the individual instructor, whether or not you want to drive their car, whether you want to be responsible for it. But we're going to be taking that slide out, but it's something I think would add great value, and if as an instructor you're inclined to do that, I think it would be a good thing. So in this second session, now that I have just the HPD 1 drivers available, we talk about driver position, where their hands should be, things to do with their mirrors, their seats, so that they're comfortable and effective in the car. And then again, building upon the material that we talked about in the first session, we talk not only about the turning mantra that we have and the basic elements of a turn, but we also talk about why hitting the apex is important, you know, an early apex versus a late apex, and what happens. And we talk a little bit about the technical aspects, you know, the radius of the turn if you early apex versus coming out of it too late. And so we talk about that, but then also look at the different types of turns, an increasing radius turns and leading to an early apex versus, you know, a decreasing radius turn where we have a late apex. So they get the basic features of, you know, a non-standard, non-symmetrical turn in this second session. Even though they've been out already for one session, We go through the procedures that they should have for their first and their last lap of the event. Again, talking about staying offline, how they enter the track, building heat in their brakes, and just getting prepared for that event. And then once the checkered flag has been flown, what they need to do there as well. At that point, we release the drivers, who then will be going out for their session. The format for the next download session is again the same thing. We go through the incident reports and build some repetition there. In promoting, the sport of driving, I want to talk about what they should do if they want to take their driving to the next level. So I talk about driver preparation, and each driver developing a plan, and whether that plan is just to do a few day events and have lots of fun with their buddies, that's a plan, or do they ultimately want to end up with racing, and what's a plan look like for that. I have a couple of track guides that are available that I show them, as well as some training material. The Going Faster book is a phenomenal technical book, and so we talk about things that they can do to develop their skills as a driver. I also encourage them, for race simulations, iRacing.com, and then looking at the YouTube videos of each individual track, but really encouraging them to be careful about who they watch, because there's a lot of bad drivers with videos on YouTube. So having some discernment about what they would use for driver preparation. Talk about individual things that they can do, create track logs or event logs, or even the car logs, and I show them examples of material that I've prepared so that they can start to build their library of tools to help them get better. I encourage them that after they've developed themselves as a driver, then you can start to look at your car and you have the decision between a daily driver or a dedicated track car. If it's a daily driver, the first suggestion is tires and suspension and brakes, and only doing tuning and adding horsepower after you've done those things. If they're looking at buying a dedicated track car, my first thing is, don't buy anything yet. Find out what classes are popular, find out what is a good build, and then don't buy anything yet. Rent a car, try to borrow a car, and get a little bit of seat time before you buy. And then again, drawing upon personal experience, talking about get counsel before you do, get it inspected before you do, and then be aware in most cases it's a buyer's market and they can negotiate prices for these cars very well. To further develop their kind of vision for NASA and the things that we do, I talk about the different programs that we have and the difference between spec racing and manufacturer class racing or open racing, and so that they get an encouragement there. I'm also able, usually at this point in time, to exit the classroom and go watch a start with them. We were able to watch the start of the Miata race at Auto Club, which was quite exciting. And so we'll go up and watch the racing so that they can get a kind of feel for what that level looks like. Same, again, repetitive process, going out for our next session, encourage them to be aware of all these different things before they go to the track. And then finally, I encourage them to support our track photographers. I know we give them podium time at the beginning of the day, but I think there's great value in these guys taking pictures home, and it's fun, and it's a way for them to share their excitement with other people. So I think that is a good thing for us as well. I release the HPD2 drivers at that point and continue with the HPD1 drivers, and we talk again, building a little bit more on turns, going through the mantra, but then looking at a disposable turn, looking at turns where we have to throw away the first turn to create an effective turn for the most important turn on the track. And so we build upon those initial sessions by going a little deeper into the material. At this point, we release the HPD drivers, who will hopefully return for the fourth session, where, in addition to covering the incident report, we watch a video with Jackie Stewart. It's the one that he did with Top Gear and talked about turning and smoothness. So we watch the video in class, which is always fun. And then in that session, we also have an open forum. I've been trying to bring in NASA staff to talk about NASA or different aspects of it, with track officials, in race group leaders or drivers, just to broaden their exposure to what this event is. And so at that point, we release them for the last briefing of the day. The Sunday schedule is also currently very similar to this Saturday schedule. A goal of mine is to try to add more content so that they're hearing not only new things during each session, but new things on Sunday that they didn't hear on Saturday. So that's a project I'm undertaking, hopefully before Buttonwillow. So we had our pre-event mailer that is new that we're doing for the HPD 1 and 2 drivers. Certainly the classroom and curriculum is much different than it's been. And then in the last couple of events, we've actually followed up with the 1 and 2 drivers with a survey, an online survey, to get their feedback about what they liked and what they would like to see changed. And we're trying to take that information and apply it to our curriculum. So that's the material that we've done this year a little differently with HPD 1 and HPD 2 groups. I appreciate the chance to be able to do this in the classroom and totally honor the things that you guys do in the car. I don't know that I'm brave enough to actually sit in the car with these guys and go as fast as you do without knowing more about them than you do. So in my mind, you guys are the fun uncles. I get to be the dad in the classroom and impose rules. You guys get to be the fun uncles on the track. If you have any questions, any comments, I'll put my email address at the bottom of this when we distribute it, and I would really welcome your feedback. Thanks, guys.